Young people make the biggest demographic in Kenya's population, amounting to about 75%, the largest in the region and as a voting bloc. Yet they are seen to be lagging behind in political participation in the country, and with just about 10 months to the 2022 general elections, top contenders have shifted focus to issues that would best entice the young voters with the hopes of increasing their numbers. But are young people alive to the kind of numerical strength they have? What is the likelihood that they can form the biggest voting bloc and use it to negotiate for their stakes? Will they tilt the scales in the upcoming polls? Now, on this episode of The Front Row, we speak to the young people to get their perspective on the 2022 race and just what will be the place of the young voter in this particular election. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Front Row. I am Akisa Wandera, and to be part of this conversation, we're asking you on our tweetable question: have the Kenyan youth understood and appreciated their place in Kenyan politics? Have the Kenyan youth understood and appreciated their place in Kenyan politics? What are your thoughts? We'd also love for you to engage with us and our panelists as we continue this conversation at Akisa Wandera, at KTN News KE. The hashtag to use is a front row. And of course, you can also speak to us on our Twitter, on our text line, that is 22155. I'll gladly be taking a look at a number of your views as we continue with the program. Let's take a look at who we have on the panel for this conversation on youth and politics. Arnold Maliba, who's already here in studio with us, is a team lead at Open Future Hub, a partner at the Policy House Consult, a principal partner at LA 21 Limited. He'll tell me if I've gotten it right. And he has experience in leadership management, public policy, communication and law. He's also a regular television contributor, and he'll be speaking to us on some of the perspectives they have on the young people and how best they will contribute to this particular race. Thank you for joining us. Really good to have you here on the show. Virtually, we have Stella Agara, who's an independent consultant on governance and youth development matters. Before then, she was the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Emerging Leaders Foundation, Youth Advisor at Action Aid Denmark, Lilongwe, Malawi. At Africa Youth Trust, she served as Deputy Executive Director, Programs Manager, Project Manager, Programs Officer, Monitoring and Evaluation, as well as Program Officer at Youth Action Against Corruption. Stella is joining us virtually. Thank you very much for making time for the show. And a bit later on, we'll be speaking to Zach Kinuthia, who's on his way here. He is the Chief Administrative Secretary, Ministry of Sports, Culture and Heritage. He has previously served in the same capacity in the Ministry of Education. He's among the youngest leaders to hold a top government position in President Uhuru Kenyatta's government. He will be joining us shortly here on the show. But before we get into the conversation, the youth in Kenya will, without a doubt, play a crucial role in the August 2022 general election, and the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, is targeting to enlist at least 6 to 7 million of the voters as political leaders endear themselves to the youth vote, both in political rallies and on social media. Now, how significant is the youth involvement in politics? George Maringa starts us off with that story.
That the youth are the main target in next year's election cannot be ignored if digital and social media activity is anything to go by. From captivating posts on social media,
mimi ni wa Maniu na kuambia karibu pia Maniu, asante.
Yule aliandika kwa Maniu, niambia jana mliona Tonvilla,
to incorporating comedians in their skits. Others have even gone the extra mile of speaking in Sheng.
Dondoka juu mambo ni fresh na mutua. Wakifunga tutafungua, wakipanga tutapangua. Sasa extravaganza ni ya fresh, mambo ni fresh.
All these in a bid to endear themselves to the majority group of voters who are the youth. Data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics shows that 35.7 million Kenyans are below 35 years. That translates to 75.1% of the total population. It is for this reason that those eyeing the presidency have to do all they can to sway the youth numbers to their side.
Lazima for ikue different. Ama ni aje? Volume iko sawa? Ama niongeze?
But the young people in the country have for long been said to be disinterested in politics. For a country churning out fresh graduates every year, unemployment remains a thorn in the flesh. It is not the first time that attempts to lure the youth have been made. The BBI report recommended minimizing taxation of new and small businesses by giving young people a tax holiday of at least 7 years as a support base. But in all this, one thing remains clear. There is specific campaign content for the youth in political rallies and through digital and social media. George Maringa, KTN News.
It's my hood.
Right, a very good place to start from, just looking at how leaders are engaging with all form of tactics that they are employing to just try and entice young people and have them on their side, looking at social media, using lingo that is akin to what young people are using right now, Sheng, you name it, using celebrities who are, you know, part of what from the youth demographic or India more towards young people and the content they like. Do you think this election is about young people? Are you confident it is?
For the first time, this election is going to be about young people. It has never mattered since 1992 when YK92 young people played a role. And by the way, there is quite different definitions for youth depending on who you are. Politically, youth means male youth who are goons and strong. So every time you see people who caused trouble somewhere,
young people.
The journalists and the media will always go out and say young people. So if you have to look at it from that particular end, yes. But why do I say that youth is going to be a factor in this particular election? Is for a simple reason. The hustler thing, the hustler tag. In 2013, people aged between 18 and 35 only constituted 43% of the registered voters, if you look at the IBC post-election evaluation report. But in 2017, there was an improvement. 51% of the registered voters were people aged between 18 and 35. Right. But still, that did not reflect so much in the numbers of the people who were elected. For example, we only had one governor who was under 35 at that particular time. Right. I think 18 members of parliament, 11 women rep, and there's quite, for members of parliament and county assembly, we just had 430. But in trying to ensure that we make this thing look good, we then brought in all those that are youthful. Even though Article 260 of the Constitution is clear on who is a youth. Who's a youth, yeah. As in a person, there's a difference between youth and youthful. Yeah, so anyone who is 35 and above is not a youth. 18 to 34 specifically. Not 35, 34. If we were to read Article 260 Q properly, because it says anyone who has the collectivity of individuals who have turned 18 and they have not turned 35. Okay, but then for ease of moving around, we always say 18 to 35. So once you are 35, you are not a youth. In the last year's 2019 census, we were talking about projection from that end. We have got 13.6 million people who are between 18 and 35. Yes. If we were to use that number directly, then that would be 67% of the registered voters, because we have got 19.6 million registered voters so far. Well, we can add the 200 that they did the other day, this week. But still, that is about 65 to 67. But that is not how it is. It's one thing to have an ID, it's one thing to count in numbers, and it's also another thing entirely to be registered as a voter. As a voter, yeah. So that's where we are. But then why is the youth this time quite attractive? Yeah. Why do we see politicians, after going to Mount Kenya, the next target is young people. Is going to young people? It happens for the first time because I have worked in this sector. For most of my adult life, I've worked for young people and with young people. from a church as a church youth leader, from a National Youth Council representing Nairobi, ended up being a spokesperson representing young people of this country at the UN, and then also being the first chairperson of the TNA Youth League. So I've spent my adult life working with and for young people. And I will say today, if you see how the two major coalitions, UDA and UAR, UDA is so much focused on youth.
Yeah.
This hustler thing is so much about young people. It's even a lingo that young people use, and it makes sense to them. That is why when it became mainstream, the rest of the population was asking. They went back to the dictionary definition.
Yeah, but what does this mean?
So I see where, for example, both William Ruto and Raila are coming from as the leaders of the two main formations. Because for the first time, these young people do not associate with the second liberation. They don't care about Nyayo House. Not so much. The people like myself and Stella would care, and probably Zach. But the rest of the young people are serious about, are just focused on their livelihood, and that is all.
Okay.
So, for the first time, we have got a critical mass of voters whom you might not appeal to through any other means. Because until this particular election, the youth vote did not exist as a block. Because the easiest way to approach young people were to segment them either into border, the students, but then not wholesome as youth. But for women, it was much easier, probably because women is a permanent state. Even a little one is a woman. It doesn't change.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want us to bring in Stella Gara now. Maliba here, very confident that this election, for the first time, will be about young people. So then how can young people take advantage of this? That is, if you agree with him.
Thank you very much, Akisa, and I'm glad you're asking me the question about how young people will take advantage of it, because based on the statistics that Maliba has provided, it definitely shows that, one, in terms of numbers, young people have an advantage. Number two, from the footage that you played just before we came on the show, it's apparent that every politician is trying to woo young people, some of them, of course, struggling tremendously to even speak the language of young people so that they can just bring them closer to themselves. Indeed, this election is about young people, and definitely young people are going to be a determining factor, but only if they plan effectively to be able to use the momentum that is currently growing around them for the right purposes. You know, I've observed some of the conversations that young people are having, for example, with Eric Omondi as he's busy trying to market Jimmy Wanjigi. I've observed the conversation that the Prime Minister had today with the young people, and I've been observing the conversations that the young people have been having with the Deputy President, His Excellency William Ruto. And one of the things that I've realized is that young people are still assuming that they are lining up for help from amongst these people. They still have not realized. So number one, getting a full realization that they are in charge of this election and that their voice is going to determine the direction that the election will take is extremely important. Number two, as they take charge, they need to recognize their place of strength. Akisa, you will remember in Uganda, Bobi Wine was having quite a headway as far as campaign was concerned because they were campaigning online. And he had privilege as far as online participation is concerned. So he would be holding press conferences where he had 10,000 youth, which is a whole rally. And at the same time, if His Excellency, the President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, held a meeting, he would only have 221 participants in his meeting. That was an area where he had tyranny. And unfortunately, he decided to leave the online platform and go and compete with the president of his nation on a platform where his president always wins, on the ground. And I think that's one of the mistakes that he made. If he had continued with the conversation online, he would have mobilized for longer. He would have been unrestricted, and of course, he would have frustrated his opponent quite clearly. So what am I saying when I refer to that about Kenya? That young people should ensure that they organize tremendously online and that they find mechanisms to transform the conversation that is taking place online into real-life conversations in the physical. Because not all young people have access to online platforms in Kenya, so it's important that the messages that young people are planning, organizing around, find their way to the informal platforms, or at least find their way into SMS, which a little bit more young people have access to, who may not necessarily have access to a smartphone. Number three, the youth of this country have consistently been cheerleaders of existing politicians. And so you'll find them lining up behind the former prime minister, lining up behind the deputy president, insulting each other alongside those two people, and even creating enemies, permanent enemies sometimes, while engaging in those conversations. They will have to make a decision that in this election they're not going to be followers, and take note of the fact that they're the determining factor, and take leadership of the conversations. This can happen by either being members of those political parties and beginning to challenge the discourse. Of course, it may be a little bit too late for some of those very established political parties, but then they could also join small political parties, join existing parties to ensure that then they influence those conversations. Ideally, as it is, the region is captured by young people. We had a similar case in Tanzania, only that the voices were eventually stifled by violence from the state. Of course, I've already given the example of Uganda, where we had similar situations. And we have leaders all over, even the US recently, you saw, we have leaders who are doing everything to make it look like they're young. Unfortunately, most of those people cannot speak for young people, and I'm certain that we're going to be exploring this conversation later today about how they manage to forge a pretense, they manage to communicate messages as if they're in support of young people, but eventually they don't. Some of the conversations that were held today between the former Prime Minister and the university students are things that we have already discussed before. Maliba and I sat on a panel trying to negotiate for our current president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, to still create a department for youth when he came into power. But of course, our voices were lost in thin air. So the question you're asking...
I'd like to cut you short. I'd like to cut you short, Stella. I'm not sure if you can get me clearly, but you've raised a very important point that I'd like to for you to expound on before I speak to Zach Kinuthia. He's already in studio here. And you say that what has been seen, and not just in the country, even in countries that have had elections recently, it is people who are seen to be speaking for the youth, when really that's not what is happening. So then how do they stop being cheerleaders to owning the space themselves? And is that what you're seeing happening in the current political space?
So indeed, the point I'm trying to make is that majority of the people who are claiming to be speaking for youth are just doing it on the surface, are depending on a lot of coaching. You've seen what the son of the former president and MP for Baringo, rather Senator for Baringo, was actually trying to do in this conversation, where he even the speed of delivering form, itabidi iwe tofauti or something like that, is just a struggle. So young people are still surrounding themselves with such people and really clapping around those conversations. But for me, the difference would be created when we see them on the table organizing. And it doesn't matter whether they've been welcomed into these spaces. It doesn't matter whether they've been welcomed into ODM or whether they've been welcomed into the Hustler Nation. I think even organizing alongside other platforms and ensuring that then they're demanding of these political organizations to include young people in their lineup, to see young people actually nominated, to see young people receiving certificates, to see young people on the party lists is going to be critical. They don't necessarily have to be in those political parties, but they need to be organizing. Unfortunately, they are not.
All right.
So far, there's very little time left, and they're not organizing, and that's something that they really must think hard about.
Okay, Stella. All right, I'll be getting back to you shortly. She raises a very important points, and Zach, coming at a time when ODM leader Raila Odinga today was meeting young people from the Mount Kenya region, and Stella is raising issues that we are still cheerleaders to top leaders or top contenders in this particular race. We still don't seem to be fighting for that space for ourselves. Are these people, what these contenders saying, resonating with young people, or they just want to be seen to be resonating or speaking to issues that affect young people?
I think both perceptions are right, that some are speaking to real issues affecting young people, others are looking and seeming like they know the things affecting young people. However, the good thing is that in both of these conversations, the young people are participating. It is important to know that those who know the issues affecting the young people may not necessarily be young. And those who seem to be speaking about the issues of the young people definitely don't know about them because they are coached. And I have heard my sister speak about that. Let me say it this way. Young people, as a voting bloc, is an illusion. And I'm one of the young people in this country who has participated in 3 general elections, now serving in government as a CAS. And I can comfortably say that this game for young people participating in meaningful conversations is rigged out. The young people who understand things that should be done about young people are not in charge. It is important for me to say that on TV, that the people who understand the things that affect young people are not in charge. So, when the policies are formulated on addressing the youth bulge in Africa, in Kenya, and largely in the South, the policies do not necessarily reflect. But let me put it clear. My brother here and I have been in the streets for a long time, in the street of championing young people's agenda. We have made brilliant papers. We have thought about important ideas that can address now and the posterity of youth, because him and I will soon exit this space. And those who will come after us will largely be experiencing the same problems, diverted in different tentacles. But you ask a good question. Why is it that young people are cheerleaders? What else can we be? Leaders? The answer is yes. But is a system in such a manner, is it crafted in such a manner that young people can meaningfully participate in politics? The answer is no. And why do I say no? Let me tell you. I just came back from a Southern African country where I was taking part on youth participation in politics and governance. And my speech was based on a simple thing. How do people like Obama, how do people like Macron, how do people like the powerful ladies in Scandinavia rise in political leadership like prime minister, presidents, and grow? A simple reason that perhaps would explain why we are bedeviled. If you do not have political parties systems that can nurture, that can grow, that can allow participation within a system, and that can put these people in positions that progress in growth, young people are not going to participate. The 5 contenders of presidency today have strength because they have vehicles that can drive them to power. Right. Young people can only join these vehicles because there's no vehicle that has generally created a way for them to grow up. If we would want to do this in the future, if there is today there is a political vehicle that is open and saying we are going to flout a youthful presidential candidate as Party X, I am telling you, young people would participate meaningfully and make a debut.
What stops them from doing that right now?
Where is resources to make a political party? Women are more than men. If one woman like you would stand up for presidency, be honest, would you get it? Let's be honest, as dynamics as are, may not get it, isn't it? If a youthful man like Maliba here stands for president, is he going to get it? The truth is, he may not now.
Yes.
Why? Because there are no systems to ensure that resources are mobilized within an enclosed system that can propel these people to power. Otherwise, you have no money. Okay. Where do I get money to
You raised some very important points, and I'll have Stella and Maliba here comment on that a youth voting bloc is an illusion. We are still not there. We have systemic issues, and they start even from the political parties. You've led a youth league in one of the political parties. You'll be speaking to us about that. But I want us to quickly take a break. Remember, we are asking you to comment and participate in this particular conversation, and we are asking whether you think Kenyan youth understand and appreciate their place in Kenyan politics. At Akisawandera, at KTN News KE, the hashtag to use is FRONTROW. And if you're a young person, we'd really love for you to speak on this issue as we take a look at what really would be the space of young people in the upcoming elections, just about 10 months away. So get tweeting and texting. I'll be taking a look at some of your views as we continue with the program.